Welcome, everybody. My name is Geoff Green, and I'm going to be your host for this month's housing market update. We're going to take this very complex subject of the housing market, and we're going to distill it down and make it real simple for you to understand what's going on, kind of where things are headed. And we're going to do this inside of 30 minutes. So let's get right to it. We have a great panel set up for you. We're going to check in with them in a little bit. But for now, let's take a look at the slides that I've presented for everybody. So are we going to see a slowdown? The answer is pretty much no. Things are going to keep rocking and rolling. I'm going to show you why that we think that is and why others agree with us. So historically, people have stayed in their homes. In other words, haven't sold their home and moved on and bought another one. Historically, that's about a 6 to 7 year average. And that was the case all the way, you can see, back to 1985 up to 2008. And then the financial collapse happened and everything kind of got turned upside down and people just kind of held, and that jumped up to 9 or 10 years during that duration. But just in the last 12 months, we've seen the single largest change between 1 year and another since the 80s. And it dropped down to 8 years. So that means that people are becoming a little bit more optimistic and willing to move. So this is a good quote from the National Association of Realtors. The pandemic likely spurred occupants to shorten their home stay as tenure in the home decreased to 8 years from 10, according to the report. This is the largest single year change in home tenure since NAR began collecting such data. So that's significant. It means that people are ready to start moving. The majority of sellers entering the market in the next year, they're planning to list in the next 6 months. 65% have already listed or will do so this winter. 93% have already taken steps towards listing their home, including working with an agent. Maybe they're hiring some contractors, getting some work done. And 36% have researched the value of their home and others in their neighborhood. So there's a lot of signals basically happening that are telling us that more inventory is coming. I think we're going to see more inventory this spring than we've seen in the last couple of years. And I know that for our realtor panelists here, as well as anybody watching, that's great news for us because that's been the problem. So interest rates, let's take a look at what's going on there. Here's what was going on with the 30-year fixed rate basically since the start of 2020 until now, so it was about 3.7. It dropped as all of the incentives were happening and all the quantitative easing and everything, but now it's kind of creeping back up, and right now we're still at about 3.1%, which is still really a phenomenal rate. But rates are ticking up. It's starting to get a little bit more aggressive in that sense. But like this slide says here, it's just really more of a transition back to a normal rate. You can see 2018, what level those rates were at, 16, 17, 19, 20, they just plummeted, and now 21, we're still not to where we were in 2019. We're still, a point off of where we were in 2019, which was really the last normal market. So we still have a ways to go in terms of rates coming up, and I do think that they will come up. We're going to hear from Chad Barris from Family First Funding in just a minute. House price, this is an interesting concept. Let's read this together. House price appreciation is resistant to rising mortgage rates, primarily because most home sellers would rather withdraw from the market than sell at a lower price, a phenomenon we refer to as downside sticky. Now, I've never heard the term downside sticky before, so that's interesting. But one thing I will say, and the reason why I put this up there, and I think that this actually might be true, is because of all the people that did not move after the financial crisis happened. There were many people that could afford to move, that had the equity to get out, but they chose to hang on because they couldn't get the number that they wanted. There were many, many people that didn't do that. And now that the market's come back around, a lot of them have sold. Now that is a small data sample because it's people that I know in areas that we operate in, so on and so forth. But needless to say, I think this is a pretty accurate statement. It's just a human nature thing, I guess. So once again, looking at rates, here's a slide that's showing that home sales are not impacted by rising mortgage rates, right? You can see that. Look, what this slide is pointing out is there's little blips of rate increases, but yet, property increase, the number of homes being sold and the prices thereof kept going. But on an overall basis, I mean, you can see the yellow line is trending down. So I think the reality is that, excuse me, I didn't mean to flip forward. What probably was the bigger point to make over the financial crisis was the abundance of bad loans being made, not necessarily the rate of interest that is either slowing things down or speeding things up. I think what caused the last collapse clearly at this point was bad loans being made. And I think that so long as we don't get into bad habits, our industry in terms of lending, I don't think we're going to see a major collapse. That collapse could very well come from another place, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be grown internally within our housing market. So here's, an average of all forecasts from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and some others. Basically, everybody's projecting that home prices are going to increase on average 5%, which is a very healthy percentage increase. This is a potential growth in household wealth. So I think that this is important if you're a buyer, maybe thinking about buying a home. And if you want to take a look at a reason to buy a home, this could be it. If you were to take a $350,000 home purchase today, this year, and you appreciate that over what we're projecting in 22 and 23 and all this stuff, the other thing, you'll gain in appreciation. And that's the reason why you should continue to persist to find that home and buy that home. And after all, it's better than renting. So context matters for purchase demand, right? The economy is improving and millennials continue to age into their prime home buying years. I think that is a very important point, that millennials, a very populous group, is aging into their prime home buying years. So regardless of anything regardless of what else is going on, you have this massive group of people that just want to buy a home. It's the American way and they're going to do it. And sometimes it doesn't matter what's going on in the broader economy. They're going to do it anyway. So, context remains good for the housing market. I firmly agree with Mark's statement there. When you take a look at the number of months of inventory of homes for sale, it's still a seller's market. I'm going to show you the exact graphs on this so that you can see what the numbers are. But, about a 3 months supply of inventory, that's very low. This year, 6 to 7 months is a stable kind of neutral marketplace. We were well into a buyer's market up here in 2010, and we're still today way down in this green territory. So there's just simply not enough inventory to see the price of homes decrease, the acceleration decrease. All these things are kind of pointed in the direction of still a very robust market in 22. So what this is showing here is how many homes actually did sell, or what the projection is to finish out the year in 2021. And notice that there were 6.5 million homes sold in 2020, which is represented in this yellow line. So 21 is projected to finish above that of 2020, which was a monster year. And it looks like 22 is being projected by pretty much all of these sources to finish ahead of 21. So 22, from everywhere that we can see, looks like it's going to be another big year. That's the bottom line. All right, so let's take a look at the stats. This is actually what's in the door. Existing home sales, to me, this is, the most important analytic of them all. It's just purely how many transactions are happening. Now, you'll see the 2021 pink line dip below the orange 2020 line. But you'll also notice that we had this huge variance, right? There's this valley here that was created by the pandemic where we had to shut down. So there was a huge amount of pent up, things happening. So we had a monster fall. The more important thing to look at is this variance of the pink and the blue, which is 2019. Now, if you remember back to 2019, it was a good year. We were moving right along, things were humming, and look at that variance. So it's still very substantially over that of 2019. So again, very robust market. Average sale price continues to go up, although like we talked about 2 or 3 months ago here on the housing market update, it's more of a deceleration. It's not a depreciating market, it's a decelerating market. In other words, prices are still increasing, but not at the rate that they were previously, right? So this was massive acceleration here, right? And it continued, and then you start to see it's just slowing down. It doesn't mean prices are coming down, because they haven't. This line hasn't crossed over that one. It just means the rate at which they're increasing has slowed. So we're still talking about deceleration for sure. And then here's the look at the month's supply of inventory. Very, very low here starting out the year. But look at this. We crossed over that of last year. It'll be interesting to see how this line continues. But again, we're the variance between 2019 and where we are now, it's closing. And that's a good thing. We need to see that. It's going to bring back a more healthy marketplace. Okay, so we're going to get to the panel in just a second, but before we do, some housekeeping items. Our next housing market update is January 18th at noon. You can always stay in touch with us at HM Update. And a special thank you to our sponsor, NewOp, the Business Opportunity Exchange, where there's always a live feed of real estate and mortgage referrals happening. So go check it out, newop.com. All right, let's get to our panel. Here's a look at our panel. We're going to get back to this contact information at the end, but let's get a live look and check in with everybody. Chad, Vikki, and Keren, welcome. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you got it. Chad, we're going to kind of come to mortgage at the end of the discussion. I'm going to check in with the ladies right now and just kind of talk about the broader marketplace. Keren, I want to ask you about appraisals. Vikki, will check in with you on appraisals too. I've been hearing in discussions that I'm having with realtors that appraisals are becoming a little bit of an issue, and that a lot of buyers who 12 months ago were dropping any sort of appraisal contingency or need for it, but that's now back in the game, and everybody does seem to be getting appraisals again. True or not true? What are you seeing?
That definitely is true. And I am finding that there are a few issues with appraisals. But the issues that I've had actually are stemming from the appraiser not being local to our area, as opposed to, the values not being out there. Because I, for instance, have a buyer that put in an offer 10,000 above asking. I was totally comfortable because I'm very familiar with the market, and the appraisal came in $30,000 below. And even though I sent comps and I had tried to have a discussion with the appraiser, he just would not listen. And so I was very frustrated. I spoke to other agents in the area because I'm only human and I could be wrong, but they agreed with me as well. So we actually ended up getting a second appraisal on that property, and we don't have an issue anymore. So I would definitely urge buyers to listen to your agent when they say, use my lender, who's a local lender, right, because the management company that will be hired will be local, and so will the appraiser.
Yeah. And I think it's important to qualify what Keren's saying, because it's not a situation where, so back before the financial collapse, any mortgage lender could directly hire any appraiser that they wanted to. And there was a lot of backdoor dealing going on, not necessarily payoffs or anything like that, but the appraisers, they had a lot of pressure on them to make sure that the number would come in right so that the deal could happen, because it reflected poorly on the mortgage banker. Now that I think one of the good things that happened in the fallout from the financial collapse was the integration of, a little bit more of a control over the appraisal process. There's these management companies now that actually place the order with the appraiser, but the lenders do have some say in which management company they can use, and they know which ones actually will hire the appraiser that knows the local marketplace and is realistic and reasonable with their comps. But I can tell you that your story is almost identical to another one that I just heard earlier 2 days ago from somebody, a realtor in our local marketplace, and theirs was off by $40,000. So I always ask the appraisal question, because to me that usually signals that there's a turn in the market, right? That the banks are, no matter what they say, at the end of the day, their appraisals and how they view the appraisals is what they really think. That's how I look at it. So whenever you start to see a lot of, problems and friction happening in the appraisal process, that means that the banks are really trying to slow down and how much they're lending, because they think that things are overinflated and they don't want to get into that, period of time where we're just in this exuberant period where bad decisions are being made,
Right.
And let's be honest, at the end of the day, the market's only going to go as far as the banks will allow it to, because without their lending, it's just nothing's going to happen. So I don't know. I don't know that I see it as a bad thing that the banks are trying to put a little bit of a lid on things, because that's how I see it. And the appraisers are a little bit afraid, don't you think, Keren? I mean,
I'm sure they
they
are.
don't want to take chances.
Right, but as agents, as experts in our market, it's our responsibility not to allow our clients to go above market value unless they're putting in $100,000 in cash. Then nobody has a problem with it. But I personally, as an agent and as a person, I would never allow a client to go so much above the value where I'm actually getting them a bad deal. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of agents out there wouldn't do that as well.
Yeah, but there's a lot that would, and there's and look, let's be honest, some people will hear our advice but not listen to it,
Right.
and they're going to do what they want to do anyway, and you can't fault the realtor for that. I mean, that's on the buyer. It's their decision to do what they want. So
Right.
Vikki, I want to check in with you on this appraisal discussion. Are you experiencing some issues as well, or hearing that on the ground?
I haven't so far, knock on wood, had any issues with appraisal. Actually, on one of my listings, the appraisal was waived. So we were pleasantly surprised with that. And the ask, we're still under contract, so I don't want to say too much, but we're over ask and it was waived. So that was nice. On some other recent transactions where I have the buyer, I think what I'm finding is that we don't have the bidding, at least with me on my deals, I don't have the bidding wars that we had a few months ago. So buyers are paying under ask. I don't know if it's because the sellers went crazy and went too high on their asking price and then they sat for a while. I think we talked about this a little bit last month. So naturally the buyers are also bringing the prices back into check. You're saying that the appraisals are kind of bringing the market back into check, but I think buyers are doing that too. And the houses are sitting. Sometimes someone has had to do a price drop and that's why the prices are lower than original ask.
Wow. We're actually talking about price reductions again.
One of my deals, there was a price drop on it before we put in our offer.
Yeah. I mean, that's for most of my career in selling homes, it was all about price reductions, because the market was just so soft and it was so, there was no intensity there. So sellers were competing against each other to attract the very few buyers that existed that were actually willing to buy. I mean, that wasn't that long ago that the market was like that. And then we got into this overheated situation.
I don't know that it's that the market is softening or that sellers were getting unrealistically greedy.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said there. But I also think I think a lot of people have been called back to work. They have to go back into the cities, so the suburbs are not experiencing that intensity anymore because people have to go back to work, and now that things are starting to open up a little bit more. I mean, we've got this, variant of COVID coming through New York right now, and they're shutting everything down once again in the city. But that will pass, so yeah, no, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but it's good to hear. And Keren, I want to hear about you. Do you agree that there's less bidding wars going on in your marketplace in North Jersey?
Yeah, I definitely do agree. I have a few listings where 6 months ago we would have sold right away and we haven't. And what's really important is to be completely honest with your seller and let them know, look, this is where we need to be if you want to sell quickly. If you want to sell, if you want to sit on the market, we can list it here, but just be aware. So this way, it doesn't come back to us saying you said I could sell it such and such price. But there definitely are some price drops that are happening. I definitely agree with Vikki.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's interesting just from my perspective, right, to check in with you guys in depth like this every month. I can tell you that the discussion we're having right now was not the same discussion 3 months ago. You know, it was a very different discussion, and there was still a lot of bidding wars, but not as many as 90 days before that. You know, but they were
Right.
still happening, and it was still pretty much, it was, in other words, there was 4 bids on every house, not 14, right? But now it's like, okay, well, there might not be any bids, right? So
Right.
you're seeing this, right? It's, and we operate in the Northeast and the suburbs of New York City. But I think if we were to talk to people from around the country, it would be the same experience. And again, I think the major reason why is because people are going back into the urban centers to work. You know, I think that's something I don't hear anybody talking about, but to me, it's just common sense, you know? Okay. Chad, we've got about 10 minutes left. Let's talk about mortgages. I'll let you kind of say what you want, but my question is, because I do firmly believe that the more I think about it, and I've lived through this last, 15, 16 years and put a lot on the line because I quit a career and got into real estate and risked a lot of capital to build my business, so on and so forth. It was bad loans that created the bubble the last time around, not high interest rates or low interest rates. It was bad loans. And I do see, in other words, bad decisions by the lenders, causing that problem 10 years ago, 12 years ago now. Is that happening now? Are you seeing a lot of no doc subprime lending happening, or is that still in check?
So to rewind back in 2003, 2004, and I could tell you because I went through it. That's when I started my career, and I rode the wave like everybody else. So yes, to answer your question, yes, these loans were made for stated income people who didn't need a pay stub, didn't need a W-2, and whatever you needed to make the loan work, there was a program there, whether it was 100% financing, a first and second mortgage. But these loans were made by Wall Street, then put out to Main Street for someone who legitimately could not buy a house based on their income because the market was so flooded. So to go back to what you had said, are these loans kind of coming back? Yeah, believe it or not. And they're called non-QM, non-qualified mortgages. But they're more predicated for people who legitimately can afford it, but just can't substantiate the income. So for example, a contractor who's a painter who legitimately makes $200,000 a year in gross income writes his mortgage check out of his business account. But on his personal tax return, he only shows $40,000. So are these programs back? Yes, but are they generated for people who can legitimately pay them, but not document the proper income? Yes. So
but how do you guarantee, how does the lending industry make a guy like me comfortable that that's accurate? Because if a guy's making, let's use the example of a painter, right? So he's making 200 grand a year, but he's only showing 40 grand a year on his taxes. So is he making 160 in cash and he's just stashing it under his bed? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes and no. Could be gross income before he writes off all his expenses and car payments and things like that.
And so he's washing a lot of personal expense through his business maybe, and it makes his taxable situation better, but his borrowing situation worse.
Correct.
Not saying that I do that as an entrepreneur, because not saying that's the game I play, but I know a lot of people do.
And we use it in real estate. If gross commissions come out to $200,000, you might end up with 75 because you did open houses, you have a sign under the car, advertising and whatnot. So, case in point. But the very frustrating thing is that these loans do make sense. How long's the person been in business? How much do they have in assets? Can this person last 6 to 8 months with enough mortgage payments sitting in the bank? So if you were to lend somebody money, it's almost common sense. Would you lend money to these people?
Exactly.
The funny thing is, when they say, "Oh my God, Chad, the interest rate 6.5%," well, my response is, you don't pay Uncle Sam their taxes, you're going to pay $300 more a month. What's cheaper? $4,500 more a year in mortgage payment, or pay Uncle Sam $37,000 in income tax you didn't pay? So you got to kind of pick which is going to work.
That's a good line, Chad. I like that one. If I were a mortgage banker, I'd use that.
So But yeah, these programs are coming back because there are legitimate people who have recreated their businesses, only been in business for a year, 2 years, that legitimately can pay their mortgage. But they just can't substantiate, on paper.
Okay. So I have no problem with lending to people that can afford to pay the loan back. I think that no matter, because they are an entrepreneur, I think they get penalized many times, and that's not necessarily a good thing, right? Because we want small business to be strong in our country. It's kind of one of the foundations, one of the key underpinnings of America. So we want to help those people, but I can't express it enough to you and all the other lenders, not that anybody's listening to me, but it's important that we make good loans, because if we can at least just keep doing that, we're not going to cause the collapse ourselves within this industry. It's going to take another outside force.
Well, yeah,
inflation.
You're hitting a good topic,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I want to definitely stretch on this one. So because of what had happened with COVID, right? Everybody is pulling the COVID card not to make their mortgage payments, right? So guys like me and you who could legitimately make their mortgage payments, just press the button on the website, and now they don't have to make their mortgage payments for 6 months, right? So I'll get to the point of this. So now all the servicers who are depending on collecting their mortgage payments are not making payments. They don't get payments. So when we talk about what had happened back in 2003, 2004 into 8, from these lenders and servicers who are not getting their payments because everybody's doing the COVID call, for people who legitimately can make their mortgage payments, this, I believe, would be the next downfall, hence short sales, hence foreclosures. Because there are a lot of people out there that the statistics haven't come to Main Street yet, where are they back to work? Are they able to get a job? Maybe their jobs don't even exist anymore. And at 60 years old, they can't recreate themselves.
Right.
Where's the money coming from? So this is a whole nother thing. And then it also ties into, appraisals and everything else. And it just funnels down. So,
yeah, but there's a couple factors. I mean, I don't think at least in the next 24 months, the discussion of an overwhelming amount of default, debt-ridden properties coming on as, foreclosures is going to be a thing, because there's too much demand still in the marketplace that all of that inventory will be absorbed relatively quickly. I think that there's more demand than there is supply, and that, quite frankly, it'd be good for some foreclosures to come online to get people in who can pay and get those defaulting people out and get that
Right.
cleaned up,
right,
so.
there will be a recycle process because there are
Yeah.
buyers.
Right.
But just like Vikki was saying, and Karen was saying, and not to go sideways here, but there's a statistic of how long a house has been on the market, how long that property is going to go under contract, right? So, and I'm actually reading Housing Wire right now to give you a real statistic. And going back to the price reductions, 27% of properties right now are having a price reduction because there's a certain gap. So if you put a property on the market today, will it be under contract or an offer by Friday? If it doesn't get under contract or an offer accepted within a certain time frame, how long is that property going to stay on the market? Which we're seeing more time on the market. Hence, and when it all ties into the appraisals. But yes, it's definitely a lot going on over the last 3 months, which has drastically changed. Since 6 months ago, where now it was an auction. I'll give you 10,000 more, 20,000.
Right.
So,
Right.
There was a lot going on.
And I think that really hammers home the point of deceleration, is that yes, the market is cooling off. No, it's not a bubble bursting. It's just slowing down to a more reasonable level. I mean, how long? That was a really long stretch, not for nothing. How long that lasted with, multiple offers on every property. I mean, that was nuts. It was almost 2 years worth of time.
Yeah.
And that was just longer probably than any period. And that was nationally, that wasn't like just in the Northeast or in the Southeast or Southwest. I mean, that was like.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and just even going back to what Vikki was saying, it's the buyer who's kind of dictating where they want to go with it. So now people are getting more educated, like, should I spend 20,000 more? You know what? I'm just gonna wait. And if you multiply that by all the other people who are getting more educated of what they feel the property is worth, that could be also with I don't want to say slow down, but kind of just normalizing of where things should be versus an auctioneer. And that's where it trickles down to the appraisals. Is this property really worth what it's being sold for?
Right.
And, I've seen a couple of those situations, literally in the last 48 hours where I have had issues with the appraisals.
Yeah, no, it's happening, and we're going to start to see more of it as things, because, think about it. Like, if you're an appraiser, it's hard, right? Because which way is the market really headed? Is it up? Is it down? So how does your appraisal, factor into all that stuff? Because if you're in a downward trending market and this sale is more than the house down the street, that's basically the same house. That's a problem for you, because that you're in a market that's not necessarily going to match 6 months from now. But what I will say is this, and this is why it's important to have a good realtor represent you both as a buyer and a seller. Any buyer agent worth their salt, when they have a buyer that wants to negotiate, wants to put an offer in on a property, the buyer agent should be asking the listing agent, do you have any offers on the place? Because every negotiation is a function of time. Like, if I go into a negotiation on behalf of the buyer and I know that there's no other offers, they've been on the market for 6 months, and if the listing agent is willing to share with me, have there been any offers? Why, what happened to them? I mean, a lot of listing agents are too smart. They're not going to share that, but some open up and they tell you. But if I know I've got a lot of time on my hands, well, then the initial bid for my buyer is going to be a lot lower than it would have been if there were 3 other buyers on the plate. It's just that simple, so that's what's going to happen. Is the less buyers you have, the more time there is. That why wouldn't you negotiate it if you can? So it's a function of time. Okay. We're at 12:32, 2 minutes over budget. Not bad. Vikki and Keren, I will just want to ask you if you want to add anything else here real quick before we part ways.
I actually just want to wish everybody happy holidays and a happy new year, and everybody stay safe out there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Glad you're feeling better.
Thanks.
Yeah. Happy holidays, everyone. Have a happy new
All right.
year.
Yeah, happy
Great.
holidays, everybody.
So with that, I just want to leave off on the contact information of our panelists. These are great people. They're all very good at what they do. Keren operates in the northern Jersey part of New Jersey, Sussex County, primarily Passaic County. Vikki operates in Orange County, Rockland County area of New York, which both are northerly suburbs of New York City. And Chad, he does business all over the place. So even if you're looking for a loan out west or something like that, and you're watching this video, you like what you had to hear, you can call Chad and he can help you out. All right, everybody, thanks for being here for the housing market update. We'll see you next month. Happy holidays to everybody.